listening to The Starting Zone, a podcast about World of Warcraft and the people who play it. And now, here are your hosts.
Well, hello and welcome to The Starting Zone, the podcast about World of Warcraft, the people who play it. Today is March 18th, 2024, and my name is Spencer Downey. Thank you so much for listening and subscribing to the podcast. I'm joined today, as always, by my co-host, Jason Lucas. Jason, how are you doing this fine Monday?
I'm doing well. We are in a very weird moment right here because we didn't get a patch last week. I was speculating maybe we would with the extended maintenance.
My guess was this week, so I'm technically correct at the moment.
Yeah, so what we got is 2 weeks of extended maintenance back-to-back and no patch. But we know the patch is tomorrow, but we still don't know anything about it. So,
yes, correct.
We're in kind of a weird spot with that. Everybody's been kind of holding their breath. And I think the way that they are doing this is cool. I like this as a player, but I have a feeling that with the way it's been built up and how the community's been starving for the last few weeks here, I think this is ultimately going to be considered a disappointment no matter what it is. I don't think whatever they drop tomorrow is going to make people feel better about how upset they were about how it's coming in. Again, for myself, I don't really care. I think it's cool. I think doing something different is cool. And I hope whatever it is awesome. But you sort of have been teasing this surprise since late last year, right? Whenever the roadmap came out. So you're teasing a surprise, which is kind of weird. And just nothing to say. We're used to this kind of constant cycle of PTR builds and blue posts and whatever, and we've gotten very little of that in the last 2 months. And so WoW players are WoW players, and they start getting kind of uppity because there's nothing, they can't see what's on the horizon, and they can't min-max in advance, and we don't have guides and add-on updates and all this other stuff that we kind of expect to have in place.
Well, and recognize you also have content creators who are doing okay, is it today? Are we going live the moment this thing goes live? And we'll see what's going on. And they are adding to that same level of anticipation for this whole thing too. So yeah, there is definitely part of the problem. Sorry, continue. I know I interrupted in there.
Yeah, I just think whatever it ends up being, a lot of people are just going to be disappointed because the buildup has been more than anything that they can actually deliver on. You know what I mean? And yeah, it does. It obviously for content creation, it's bad, but I don't think that they should do stuff. Blizzard should do stuff specifically to feed content creation.
No, never. No.
Yeah, that's not good. But I get why people who maybe are more into daily streams or whatever.
They're part of that community.
Yeah, you need that stuff, and we haven't been getting it. So whatever it is, it's probably not going to be a big enough deal that people are actually, this was worth it. This was cool doing it this way, whatever. If you think it's cool now, then I think you'll probably be justified. And if you think it's not cool, but maybe they'll do something that'll be worth it, I don't think it'll be that. But I guess we'll find out in about, I don't know, 24 to 30 hours, something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I stand true with what I said last week, that if this is an introduction of something that is endgame, that is grindable, and feels like you get rewards from it, and is a system that's going to last through Season 4 that people can put time into, I think no one will be disappointed. But I don't think they could actually pull that off. I just don't feel like that's what this is going to be. But I feel like that's what the game's missing, right? The most common feedback I get, and this was actually just Friday night. I was inside a chat hanging out with Panda TV, with Touchpad, and with Sloot, and with Josh, all inside one chat, and we're all hanging out chatting, and we got onto this topic, and I think everyone kind of can agreed on a consensus that the thing that Dragonflight is missing is some sort of repeatable endgame, a rewarding system that makes you want to log in regularly. And me and you have been big advocates for systems like that for a long time, and people have their feelings here and there about it. But if that's what this patch brings in, then they may have just done something miraculous, right? It really might be.
I think that would be a miracle if that's what this patch involves. I can't imagine that it's anything like that. I mean, I do agree that end game solo grind is sorely lacking, and it's a missing part of an MMORPG like this in Dragonflight. But man, I don't know. I think that's lofty for whatever they're delivering tomorrow. They've kind of said it's limited time and stuff like that. So I hope it's cool, and I think it'll be fun. And I think doing a surprise drop is semi-surprise is cool. But yeah, I don't suspect that they'll do something like this again.
Yeah, no, I agree. I don't think we'll see something like this ever again. So it is I agree. If you can sort of like lessen your expectations and just enjoy the ride of it, this is a one-time opportunity to be super surprised by what the WoW team's doing since like Burning Crusade. It's like the last time we had like a surprise. So just, keep that in mind as far as how this goes. So, all right. But yeah, this past week in World of Warcraft, did you get up to anything in particular?
Yeah, I mean, it was, again, single raid night week. It's just kind of where we're at. Again, we don't have the signups to do Mythic. I can't feel the Mythic team right now. And so, Tuesday was kind of unremarkable, just kind of blasted through normal Farok and heroic full clear. I think we have like one guy who's still kind of fishing for an axe drop at this point on an alt. So whatever, it's cool. You can bring the alt and we'll see what happens, but it's not like a huge priority to get it. We did have a kind of a healthy group though. We had about 18, 19 people in, a couple, friends of one of our newer guys who's been a nice addition to the team. He's got a bunch of friends from the team that he came from who, they sort of bottom out and they stop doing stuff, but people still want to play. So that's been a kind of a nice benefit, and they're all pretty chill people who fit in nice with the group. So that was cool, not having to scrape together 10 people just to get into a raid and get a boss dead was nice. And did a couple keys at night. Nothing really, stood out. Not pushing, doing like low 20s, which is kind of funny to say, I guess, the way the season is shaped up. But brought my rogue buddy along, who I kind of mentioned a couple weeks ago, like, dude I've been playing with since Pandaria, one of my best WoW friends, probably my best like WoW friend, I would say, like my favorite person to like hang out and just BS with and play WoW, who's been in and out of the game a lot over the last few months. He's trying to get back in, so getting him in, like we did a 22 at all, and we kind of missed the timer because of some issues with the final boss and everything. We finished it, and he's like, oh, that was a 22? Like, oh my God, I didn't even realize. And, we did get him one of the 20s he didn't have in time after that, so that was cool. And, I got a couple other friends who were sort of nibbling, who were, like, waiting to come back. So, I don't know, maybe .6 will be the thing that brings him actually back in. So we'll see what happens this week. I mean, I wouldn't be against doing extra nights to do normal raid or whatever for people that I like and want to help out, people that I have a history of playing together with. Like, yeah, sure, let's do it. Let's do a normal clear, whatever, get your feet wet, get back into it, see the fight, start getting some gear, come to heroic next week, whatever. So we'll see. It's one thing for people to say that. It's another thing for them to actually log in and start doing it. But if they're around, then, maybe we'll do that, which would be fun. And the other thing I did last week was I spent like a fair bit of time, not an exorbitant amount of time, but I spent a fair bit of time doing the Hearthstone event, hanging out at the portals and hopping into Group Finder and shard hopping and grabbing a couple portals every spawn. And I ended up getting everything. I got all the cards. I got the, obviously you get the toy for getting 10 different cards. So I got that. I got the tabard. I got the hat. I got the belt. I got the bag. I got the Sarge pet and the Stone of the Hearthstone themed Hearthstone toy. It's the thing that makes you go back to your home, which I have to say is incredible. The Stone of the Hearth is, I think, really the crown jewel of this event. It's probably the coolest Hearthstone they've ever done. Even if you're not into Hearthstone the game, like the animation of your character, like putting the game box down and the game box opens up and it animates and then all these VFX start popping out of it and the card floats up to the top. Like, it's a really elaborate and very cool Hearthstone animation. And the event, we'll talk about it a little bit later on. The event has been extended, so if you don't have it, I highly encourage you to start putting some time in this week, because I don't know, we may never see these again. Like, who knows? Maybe they'll come back on Trading Post or something, but this could seriously be like a done deal as of Friday this week. So I get the mount. Like, the mount is super high quality and awesome looking. Like, I hope it becomes dynamic. It might be scary, like dynamic flying on a mount that small, but like, I want to do that. So, I mean, the event is like not super interactive, but it's also not, it's not very, it doesn't ask a lot of you, I guess. So that's, you kind of have it up on a second screen and just wait for the timer, kill some mobs and see what you get. So yeah, I would say the mount and the Hearthstone toy are just incredible visually, really cool. So I'm glad I got them, and I think it's worth prioritizing because you may never be able to get them again, and they'll be cool to have for years to come.
Yeah, it's very similar to the last Diablo event that happened in that way of the treasure goblin spawning, and then you essentially, once you get those rewards, they don't come back, right? The only time we saw them come back was at a future anniversary event. So, maybe at the 15-year anniversary or something of Hearthstone, they might do something with WoW where some of this stuff becomes available again. But yeah, this is sort of your best bet at trying to get it, is doing it right now. I have been totally unlucky. I've probably done 15 or 16 of these things and gotten like nothing as drops, because you can just get like the wild cards, and that's what I get, is I get like wild card packs. I did have someone trade me Sarge, which was very nice of someone to do, because they just were like, I've gotten so many of these, and I'm like, well, I haven't gotten anything, so that's great. So I'm glad they extended it, because I still want to get it, and I have to find time in my work schedule this week before Friday to find ways to sneak in, or like every evening just leave it open all evening to try and get, like, I don't know. I'll figure it out, because I want to get all the rewards. And there's some really fun things like you mentioned, so I'll put the effort into doing that. It's just very strange that this is one of those events where I wish when you defeated them, they dropped currency and you could spend currency to buy the things that you wanted. And you were just guaranteed to see currency drop, because it's very odd to be like, yes, you have a chance for something to drop. And it's like, well, I literally have failed the roll so many times. What is going on? Like, this is unfortunate for a limited time, limited reward event. I could actually put large amounts of effort into this and not get anything out of it is very strange. So I hope they resolve some of that, or at least, maybe in the last 2 days, they just maximize the drop rates and people start getting like 4 or 5 items off of killing something. I don't know. But it's very strange to be in that situation. Anyways, this past week in WoW was pretty much Hearthstone event for me as far as what I was focused on doing. So I'll just keep doing that this week, and hopefully things work out, and we'll see what this new patch drop is, because that's going to be the interesting factor for a lot of people this week, and what's going to have a lot of content creators talking. And obviously we'll talk about it next week when we hit up the show and see what's been going on and fill everyone in on all the tips and tricks around the event. But let's hop into what's going on this week in World of Warcraft before we dive too deep into the event. All right, so this week is Battleground bonus event. Mean the sign of battle is up, increasing your honor gains from Battleground objectives and wins by 50%. And of course, there's a quest to win 4 of them. They get you some marks of honor and conquest. It is also the Shadowpan Showdown Brawl Week. This is one of the most unique brawls that they threw out there. This is a PvE-VP situation where basically each team steps into Tiger's Peak Arena, and there are 2 bosses in the middle of the arena that are fighting each other. And the goal for you is to try and defeat the other team's boss while defending your own. And it gets pretty spicy. So you can do everything from messing with the other team to actually just trying to, focus down the boss and figure out who's going to win first. I think it's a great, interesting brawl for them to do. And I wish that they'd experiment a lot with this stuff, because this is very cool. So there's also the Something Different quest that gets you some marks of honor, conquest, and honor for winning one of these. But this is a fun brawl. If you haven't experienced it yet, it's certainly worthwhile checking out.
Yeah, it was one that was on the shelf for a long time. It was like broken or something.
Yeah,
it's not that long that's been back in the rotation overall, like since we've had brawls as a weekly thing. So yeah, you might have missed it. So maybe give it a shot. I do think there's more space for like a PvP VE thing to be in the game as like maybe like a mode or like a general concept for PvP, right? Like we've seen that in other games that are kind of similar to WoW that have that same sort of thing. It would be maybe would be a cool space for them to explore. Although you do get into that sort of that realm of, okay, how many resources can we devote to this? How can we expect players to budget their time? And like, is this really what PvP or PvE focused players want, right?
Yeah.
Like, I think you'd have to make something like really robust and unique for it to be this separate thing. But there's something tantalizing about it, right? It's such a cool idea. And Shadowpan Showdown is a cool brawl. It's definitely unique and definitely worth a look if you've never seen it. But it's just, it makes you wonder. Like Destiny brought in a thing like that a few years back that was actually really cool, at least at first. But, it's sort of like it's not really any one particular thing. And so can it carve out a niche that way, or is it really just not serving anybody's purposes, as like a pillar of endgame play?
Yeah, and I could very much see them doing a battleground, like an actual battleground, where you had PvE situations trying to progress it. You were fighting large bosses at gates, and whatever team can sort of get through the gates fastest is able to actually move to the next gate the fastest. But the gates are inside a space where you can actually move from your gate to the other team's gate, that kind of idea. And so there's a lot of like fighting that happens between them as you sort of break through these different barriers, progressing towards the very end. And then the team to actually get to the very end and break through the last gate and defeat the thing on the other side first wins. And so there's a lot of like, do you bother breaking your gates? Do you wait till the other team breaks their gates? Do you go through their gates? But you have to defeat all your bosses. Like there'd be a really neat kind of play with that you could do. So I think there is room for it. It's just, as you said, whether or not that's what PvP players or PvE players are really looking to do with their time is the big question. So unfortunately, Brawls allow people to actually test that. And it could just be, I mean, obviously, Shadowpan Showdown has been back in the rotation long enough to know yet, numbers-wise, but they are able to sort of take samplings from that and see how many people actually enjoy an event and participate in things like this. So be cool to check out. All right. Mythic Plus fixes for the week are Fortified, Storming, and Bursting, meaning non-boss enemies have increased health and deal increased damage, while in combat, enemies periodically summon damaging whirlwinds, and when slain, non-boss enemies explode, causing all players to suffer damage over time, and this affects stacks. Oh boy. Fortified, Bursting, Storming. So Storming obviously is a pain to deal with, but isn't super effective. You can have people soak the tornado, these whirlwinds. There's only going to be some situations where they really trip you up, and they're not something that's sort of like synchronizing with Bursting. If anything, the worst part about the synchronization with Fortified is that because Trash is alive longer, you're probably going to have to deal with whirlwinds longer than you would if it was a Storming week on a Tyrannical week, right? Because you're just going to be in the dungeon typically longer than you normally would be. So you're probably going to have to deal with Storming whirlwinds longer. When it comes to Bursting, this is a bit spicier. Fortified can help in that a lot of the low health enemies that tend to get AoE'd and cleaved down very quickly will take a little bit longer to die, which means that you're potentially not going to blow up your group as hard with Bursting. But you're also dealing with the enemies dealing increased damage, which means any spells that either really heavily target one individual or do AoE effects are hitting your group and dropping their health low. And then when you kill something and the Bursting goes off, there's a chance that that combination of damage is more than your healer can take in some situations. So your team really has to be on top of interrupts, stuns, those sorts of things, as well as self-healing and self-sustain to try and make sure you can live through the Bursting. Any kind of dispels that allow you to dispel the Bursting stack is certainly helpful. This is another one of those weeks where particular healers do shine more than others. Priests being able to mass dispel, monks being able to revival. These are really big abilities that allow groups to essentially create a very large Bursting stack and clear it all at once, which is really nice. So just keep that in mind when it comes down to the Bursting stuff here.
Yeah, overall, I mean, I think this is a really nice week, actually. Yeah, you do. I mean, obviously, if you mismanage Bursting, it can cause wipes for sure.
Yeah.
It is a healer problem, though. So if you die, just blame the healer. No, don't
do that.
Yeah, you have to watch what you're doing, okay? But like you said, I mean, Fortified, it weirdly has some anti-synergy with Bursting because Bursting it's not like it's a percentage damage based on like the health of the thing that you're killing or something, right? It scales with your keystone rank. So yeah, you do have like a little bit more wiggle room, and sometimes it's a GCD. That's the difference between adding on a eighth stack and the stacks dropping. So you can actually use that to your advantage in a way. And obviously, you are probably not going to be worried about Bursting on the boss fights. Storming will occur during boss fights, but we have non-tyrannical bosses. So, I don't. To me, I think this is a pretty good combo for a fort week. You do have to pay attention to Bursting, though. It's just, I guess the problem with it is the way that you pay attention to Bursting is that you stop doing something, right? Like if you're trying to pay attention to one of our new affixes like Afflicted or Incorporeal, then it's like, okay, you have to target switch and use an ability on this mob. You're in a dungeon, you're in combat, you're in that mode where it's like, okay, I'm being vigilant, I'm switching, I'm doing my job. If you're trying to counterplay against Sanguine, then you're watching movement, positioning, using displacements or stuns or whatever. bursting, unless you have some way, like you said, like unless you're the healer or you have some way to purge yourself, then the way that you counterplay it is to stop attacking when a couple things die, which we don't like to do. It's hard to do, and in a lot of cases, like there are classes that either can't stop their damage once it starts going out, right, because dots are rolling or whatever, or they can't attack a target. They can't just kill the one thing that needs to die next or whatever, because everything kind of passively cleaves. You're set up for a dungeon spec or whatever, which you should be cleaving this week. It's a Fort week. Trash mobs are going to be healthy. Packs are going to live longer. You want to be doing, strong AoE damage or cleave damage. So, that stuff kind of works against you when you're trying to counterplay it. But overall, like I don't think this is a very punishing week at all. It should feel pretty good. Bosses are going to feel great. So I think it's good. I mean, if people are around, I might be trying to drag some people through 20s if they want to play, so we'll see what happens. But, it's getting to be late in the season. It's not time to start panicking yet. But if you have unrealized goals for season 3, this is a pretty good fort combo, I would say, if you want to get some stuff accomplished. So keep that in mind for this week.
Definitely. It is a good week for accomplishing those goals. And you bring that up because it is important to bring up, because we know, there's something we'll talk about a little bit later in the show too, that we are coming to an end of this season, that it is coming soon, probably in the next month. So just be aware that, we only have a few weeks left where you actually get to do these achievements and knock these things out as far as teleports and whatnot for Mythic Plus. All right. Hearthstone 10th anniversary event has been extended, as you said, to the 22nd. So you have a little bit of extra time to try and get stuff done. They've also made it so that all 3 portals in all 3 locations, Stormwind, Durotar, and as well as Valdrakken, all spawn at the same time. I definitely was the victim of the person early on in the week trying to find where the portal was, which definitely caused me not to be able to do this event as much as I wanted to. So once that hotfix went in, that is making things easier. They also made it so the portals spawn on the half hour and on the hour, which means that you can essentially have twice the opportunity to get it, which also is very good. I actually didn't know about that change. I was not up on the news, and so I was not taking advantage of the half hour for quite a long time until I, realized it when we were putting together notes, that I was like, oh yeah, hey, that's good. I should do that more often then. So hopefully I get the stuff done that I want to knock out with that. But yeah, as Jason said, there's 21 collectible toy cards that you can get during the event. Once you collect 10 of them, you actually start getting achievements that rewards you with things like the portable Hearthstone game table that are pretty cool. The cards themselves are obtained just by killing stuff that comes out of the portals, so just keep that in mind. There is a quest chain that you can do. That quest chain starts with a piece of mail that you get, and then just having to use 5 Hearthstone cards next to a table. If you don't get cards off of defeating the creatures, which is pretty much all I've been getting, then you can actually go and buy them from like a shady card dealer that's nearby all of the little Hearthstone areas. And the wild cards that you buy, if you just use them next to a Hearthstone table, will count towards that quest and allow you to complete that quest and move on to the next step of it. So that can all get finished up. But yeah, as far as the rewards go, as Jason sort of listed at the top, like there's a pet, there's a mount, there's transmog, there's all sorts of stuff. There's a Hearthstone toy. There's all sorts of stuff that you can get. So be sure that you are taking advantage of this event while it's around, because once it goes away, it is gone. And you most likely will not see a chance to get rewards like this for a number of years. Until they do another Hearthstone crossover thing and they decide to include any of them, which they may or may not do. So take advantage of the event while you can.
Yeah, I mean, again, this stuff is awesome looking. It's super high quality. I love it. I mean, I'm a 10-year Hearthstone player, of course, as we've kind of talked about the last few weeks, since this stuff kind of started coming up. So, I'm very receptive to all of these types of rewards, the aesthetics. I think it's great. A couple things I want to offer here as advice if you are sweating getting this done before Friday. I assume I didn't check the in-game calendar. I assume it ends like midday Friday, like it's not a midnight Saturday thing. So you might only have a few hours on Friday, because it was one of those things that started midday.
10 a.m. on Friday Pacific time. So
1 p.m. for us. Yeah. A couple things to note here. Not all of the portals spawn at the exact same time on every shard. So what you want to do is pick your location of choice, your home city or Valdrakken, wait for your portal to come up, defeat Dr. Boom, and then immediately hit the group finder and search the word portal. and look for the newest listed groups. A lot of times I've gotten into 3 or sometimes even 4 groups right in a row after the top of the hour, because there's like a 15-minute window where they keep spawning on various shards. And there was a weird thing at the outset of the event where it was broken in Stormwind and just kept spawning a new portal every time because they kept spinning up new shards, and every time it would spin up a new shard, it would pop the event, and then everybody would go to that shard, which would then make them spin up a new shard, and so sort of this cascading endless loop of portals in Stormwind. They fixed that, but they still don't all spawn at the exact same time. So you can normally get into like at least 3 of the portals on the event spawn. Right. So try that. And that way, I mean, if you could get now with the half-hour spawn, like I was doing all this stuff like Tuesday, Wednesday last week before the hotfixes came in. So I was getting 3-4 portals an hour and feeling really good about it. You could get 6 or 8, maybe even more now, because if there's some kind of crossover where it's like there's a couple, you're still checking the group finder and the half-hour spawns are coming in a little bit earlier than some of the other ones, you might be able to get a lot. So you are not limited to just like 1 or 2 shots an hour if you use the group finder. Another thing that I did that I found was at least like mentally helpful, and I don't know, if this really has any impact on the card collecting aspect of it, but if you're looking for the achievement, what we have kind of discovered is if you keep a full 10 stack of wild cards in your inventory, and in my case, I ended up just having 9 wild cards, you no longer get wild cards off the boss corpses or Dr. Boom's corpse. Now, that means sometimes you don't get any loot at all, right? You just mouse over the corpse and the cursor pointer never changes to the loot bag.
Right.
But then if you have loot, it's going to be something that you're missing. It's going to be one of the cards you don't have, or it's going to be one of the actual drops. So for me, that was just kind of helpful mentally, where it's like, okay, I'm not like fishing for loot that I keep pulling wild cards out. I just left a stack of wild cards in my bag, and I did that. So hopefully, for anybody who's fishing for stuff in this extension period here, hopefully that stuff helps. I think using the group finder is that's the big thing, because if you can triple or quadruple your amount of attempts on Dr. Boom, like you're going to start seeing stuff drop for sure. So yeah, give that a shot, and hopefully everybody will get what they want. I mean, this doesn't seem to me to be the last event we just had was what? Love is in the Air, right? I guess that was the last big one with the boss event, and you get the daily chance, and hopefully I get the mount or whatever, and everybody's walking away disappointed.
But it comes back every year.
Right, yeah, it comes back every year. This is not like that. Like, you do not have a daily lockout. The stuff is not like super mega rare drop. I've talked to a few people who have kind of maxed it out. And you see people on a bunch of the mount or have the pet out like all over the place. So you can get it. It's not as punishing as, some of the holiday bosses tend to be, but you do have to put the time in, and definitely use the group finder to your advantage, because if not, you may just not have enough pulls at this point. You know what I mean? With the event coming up ending, there is a lot of stuff to collect. So use a group finder to your advantage for sure.
Definitely a good tip there for sure. All right, Micro Holiday on Guro Madness is ending tomorrow, so just keep that in mind if you're someone who wants to get down there and kill some dinos and get some dino mojo and get your adaptations going, all that with your friends. That's all wrapping up tomorrow, so just keep that in mind. No actual, tangible reward or thing that you really need to sort of do so that you can actually have this available to you later on. It's just, it's just on Guro Madness, silly Micro Holiday. Check it out. All right, Trial of Style is happening. It's going to run from the 30th of March until the 26th. This is your opportunity to get together and queue up with 6 of your friends or just with other random people and get in there and basically have a 2-minute creation of transmog period on a theme, something like, summer in the sun. And then suddenly you're, okay, I'm putting together a transmog set that represents summer in the sun to me. You get up on stage, you flex, you dance, you change, do a little, show off of your outfit. People vote. It's all round robin based, and then the person who received the most votes wins, gets themselves a bunch of tokens, and you can then spend those tokens to buy transmog. So there is certainly something going on for that for folks who don't have all the transmog pieces yet. We don't know if new ones are getting added this go around. Maybe they are. Maybe that's part of the whole patch coming in tomorrow. Is there's going to be super pirate transmog? Who knows? That's possible. So we don't know. We'll have to wait and see, right? Who knows?
I can't allow myself to hope for that, because that would be way too cool. I love the pirate aesthetic in WoW and the way they pull it off, and sort of the all the theming around it and the stories we've seen over the years. And so I'd be way into collecting that. But Trial of Style is super fun. It's a little weird in that it's a 6-player scenario. You can't go in with just your dungeon group. You got to grab somebody else. But it is really fun, and everybody likes collecting Mog, right? And there's some cool Mog to collect. I mean, you got some recolors of cool sets for each of the armor classes, and they got quite a few of them now, and you got all kinds of different footwear and stuff that they added, and some other pieces here and there. They kind of don't, they don't put together an entire set, some little off pieces, but they could fill in a spot that maybe you want to do something different with, so that's cool. I really haven't done Trial of Style, to be honest, in quite a few rotations. We get it twice a year, right? It's like March and August every year. And when it was new, man, I was in there like a lot. When it would first come out, like we'd grab everybody, get together, and just cycle through it, get everybody all their stuff. But, I think we mostly collected the stuff we cared about pretty fast. So
right.
I don't know if I'll be doing this. Like it starts, Wednesday. So I don't know. I might just end up not doing it at all because I don't know if I'll be playing with my friends in the period of time when it's running. It doesn't run like the entire reset week. It doesn't
it's
line
a little
up with
weird.
reset
it's a little
week,
weird
right?
to be 6 days long. Yeah.
Yeah. So but I do think it's a great event. It's one of the coolest things I think they've put in the game. It's just a fun thing to do with your friends, right? And I don't know. Maybe people haven't checked it out. I mean, it kind of, people cycle in and out of the game so much. It's hard to know if this came in a window where not a lot of people were paying attention. It might just be totally off your radar. But man, like it's super fun to get in voice chat with like a full 6-player party and start up the scenario, and you get whatever the wacky theme is. Everybody puts together their ridiculous outfits and is just laughing at each other. It's awesome, man. It's like it's the kind of thing that like only a game like WoW can deliver. I feel like because
right.
you have all of this stuff attached to it, and then you have the social component on top of it, right? Like you have the game world and the story and the characters. You have all the collection element and even the different places all the gear comes from or how you got it or whatever. And then you have people that maybe you've been playing with for 10, 15, 20 years. You have those social bonds, and it's a great social activity to do. So if you haven't done it, I highly encourage it. I mean, you can just solo queue into it, and that's cool, but it's not really the same thing if you don't do it with other people that you're actively playing with.
It feels more like a grind than it does when you're playing with an actual active other group. Although there is something very rewarding to having 5 strangers vote you as having the best transmog. Like that is there is definitely a rewarding feeling of being like, hey, I impressed 5 people I don't know without having to actually sell anything in voice on what this is. So that is nice too. But yeah, take advantage of that while you can. Okay, so we did get a post that's like 3 sentences about what's happening with 10.2.6 and it arriving tomorrow on the 19th after maintenance, which is kind of one of those things where we're like, hey, do we move the recording this week? Well, if we did, we'd have to move it to Wednesday. And even then, we have no idea if we'd actually have enough time to play it by Wednesday to be able to do anything. So it was, no, let's record today. Let's get stuff in. And then next week, we'll talk about what's going on with it. The only important factor you have to know about this post is that this is a bold new limited time event that's going to be taking place. So we don't know what that is. But it does sound like it's going to be hey, you better get in here and try it because this is your only chance to experience this. It's also important to note that Dragonflight Season 4 will go live several weeks after the release of 10.2.6. So that's why I say you got like a month left to get your Farak, ahead of the curve achievements, to get your Amir to Soul Feed of Strength stuff in, to get whatever Mythic Plus rating you want to get done, to have your PvP stuff wrap up the way you want. Because they just mentioned it right away in here, like, hey, you got a few weeks after this goes live to actually be able to get stuff done before Season 4 hits. So, yeah, be ready with that. But that's all we got. That's all we got from this post. So, just,
It's all we need to know, man. Patch release date, and then Season 4's after that.
Yep.
Which we already knew because that's the way the roadmap was kind of laid out, right? Like it had 10.2.6 in there, and then it had Season 4 later, and then it had 10.2.7 in a separate item. So we can kind of infer that, okay, like 10.2.6 is going to come out, and then later on Season 4 is going to launch, and it'll be on 10.2.6 data. This was kind of funny. I think we probably mentioned on the show last week, like, because we knew we were getting a development update post on Thursday, right?
Yeah.
And man, WoW Twitter was not having a good time waiting for this to come out on Thursday. This did not come out. Like, a lot of times Blizzard will release news posts and scheduled posts and stuff at 1 p.m. Eastern, 10 a.m. Pacific. Like, you could kind of set your watch by that usually. So 1 o'clock rolled around and there was no post. And then like 1:30 rolled around and there was no post. I was like, well, I don't know, maybe it's 2 o'clock. Maybe something got weird with daylight savings.
Yeah, daylight savings. Yeah.
Like, I don't know. And then there was no post at 2 o'clock. I was like, oh, I guess I'll check it out later. And, you see people like anxiously. I saw people like just tweeting like nasty grams to Blizzard CS when they were posting other stuff. It's like, come on, guys. Like, this is a blog post about something that does not impact you right now or today at all. It's not going to, right? Like, they're telling you that it's about something in the future. And, people like waiting to launch streams or whatever or release content. And like, it was, I don't even know exactly what time it came out. It was hours later, it was like in the evening. And then I saw it. I had to chuckle because it was just this, it's a paragraph. Hey, patch next week, season later. Be working on your end of season achievements. Thanks. Yeah. And that was it. So there you go. Several weeks is really loaded because that could mean like 3 or it could mean like 9. I don't know. But obviously, like, they're talking about season 4 stuff. So it is time to take inventory of yourself. Like, is there anything that you want to get done? Is there anything important that you haven't done yet? That should probably be on your radar now so that you don't have to super stress about it once we get that, drop dead date, so to speak. In my case, like, there's just nothing. I'm not going to be, I hit my goals pretty early on, and a lot of the people I've been playing with have been pretty checked out. So I'm not trying to go against the grain or whatever. We're just having fun. We're farming and just hanging out. So that's perfectly cool with me. And then we'll spin it back up for season 4. But yeah, if you still want AOTC or you want, the Keystone Master kind of track stuff, then you are officially on notice, I guess. Blizzard has put you on notice. So there you go.
Yep. It's definitely limited in how much time there is left to complete these sorts of things. If that is still on your agenda to get that done. We also got a post with even more specs for hero talents and trees. They came out with 2 more Death Knight ones, Rider of the Apocalypse and Deathbringer, Demon Hunter, the Aldraki Reaver, Druid of the Claw for Druids, Flame Shaper. I want to say Flame Speaker, but I was like, that's very shaman if they were going to do anything like that. Flame Shaper for Evoker, Pack Leader for Hunter, Spellslinger for Mage, Shadow Pan for Monk, Conduit of the Celestials for Monk, although Shadowpan for Monk sounds pretty cool. Farseer for Shaman, Hellcaller for Warlock, and Slayer for Warrior. Yeah, man, if you are a heavy metal liker and you like your Slayer, then there's your Warrior spec right there. This is more previews. If you want to get a general idea of where things are starting to go, you can hop onto startingzone.com and check out the show notes for this post where they got a link to it, or you can head over to the WoW site where they do it, and they'll have a breakdown for each of these with sort of the broad scope of what these abilities are going to be doing, as well as sort of the trend that they're going with some of these builds. The biggest thing that you're sort of paying attention to is how some of these things sort of line up with different specs. So knowing, like, for Deathbringer, for your Death Knight, whether it's Frost, Blood, or Unholy, and going, okay, so Deathbringer is Frost and Blood, and then we know that Rider of the Apocalypse is going to be Frost and Unholy. And we're going to know that I think they have one in here called Sand Lane, which is Blood and Unholy. So if you're into knowing what combo you're going to be able to pick for how you play your class right now, if I'm staying Druid going into the next expansion, what kind of Druid hero talents can I choose for the specs that I like to play? You can actually get in and look at some of that stuff and then start figuring out how these points are going to be spent, because you are going to earn this whole tree, right, just through leveling up and everything in the tree. But there are some things that are choice boxes. So what are those choice boxes that you're sort of picking between, and how's that going to line up for you? And does this feel like something you want to play, or does Shadowpan Monk sound really cool? And you're like, you know what? Actually, I think I might switch because it looks like they're going a really fun path with that. So that's where these posts sort of come in and come handy, is just knowing the philosophy that they're approaching the hero talents with going into next expansion. So I imagine there'll be a really weird period of time with hero talents at the end of Dragonflight, when the system is put into the game, but we can't spend any points in it, where everyone's kind of like, ooh, I can't wait till I hit 1 level so I can start putting a point into my hero talents. That I imagine is going to happen at some point in pre-patch.
Yeah,
which will be
you're spending like a month or two just staring at that box in your talent window. Yeah. 12 specs is a lot to drop at once, and I haven't been counting. Are they done now? Have they previewed everybody? I'm not sure.
I have not been counting, but they're very close for sure.
Yeah, like they dropped a lot of them at this point. The feedback to this, like from what I have seen across the community, has been a little strange. I feel like people are really not generally like kind of not happy about this, or at least not very excited about it.
I feel like there's a wait and see. I feel like what I'm seeing is there's very much a, hey, this is great and all, but let's wait and see what this looks like. And I think that's how they've approached this entire expansion, to be honest. I think a lot of people have approached Dragonflight overall as a, okay, this sounds like a good idea, but let's see how this actually plays out, right? And that's how I was with Super Bloom. When they talked about Super Bloom, I was like, this sounds like a cool idea, but let's see how this plays out, because it could go horribly awry. And lo and behold, right? It's just that thing of, I feel like there's that. I feel like that's what the average WoW player's mindset is in the game right now, is that seems cool and I'll check it out, but I'm not going to like get hyped for it yet. I want to give it some time.
Yeah. I mean, Dragonflight has really been a proven expansion in a lot of ways, you know? It's like, can you still make this stuff compelling and good? And I think for the most part they have. And, you know, like you mentioned, Super Bloom, like they sort of badly over-relied on public events, which I think, you know, they obviously learned the lesson from it, but at some point, like, you're just too far into the process. You have to just keep going with it, I guess. But I don't think we'll see anything like that in War Within. But yeah, I mean, hero talents seem like, they seem like the opposite of everything that we disliked about, like, covenants, let's say, right? Like, they're flexible, you get everything, you can change whatever you want. So, you know, I think the initial, maybe the initial iterations are just too early to really show us, or maybe this is what they wanted, is they wanted people to be like, this sucks, like, make it cool, make it better than this, make the theming better, you know, or make this seem better on paper in terms of its impact on gameplay balance. You know, I mean, they've certainly gotten a lot of that kind of stuff. So maybe that's why they wanted to get it out so early, is because they wanted to try to give themselves some room to pump it up. I mean, I think, you know, once we're like in playing the game, you're not really going to notice the theming, the aesthetics and all that as much. Like, you will, and it'll be cool like the first few times, but for people who play the end game, you know, you're playing the meters, you're playing Warcraft logs, right? Like, that is a lot of it. I mean, as long as your spec doesn't feel like garbage to play, which that's a big concern. You know, some of that stuff I think falls off once you just get in the routine of like, okay, for this encounter I go Slayer and I do this and whatever. Okay, the next encounter I go Colossus and I do that. Like, okay, fine. And, you know, you just approach it that way. I think a lot of people who play Endgame kind of have that mindset, and they're the ones, you know, they're the ones who are going to be on the forums, on Twitter, on Reddit,
they're
going,
the vocal minority, for sure.
Right, like this thing sucks. But, you know, for players across the spectrum, like everybody who plays the expansion is going to have access to these, right? So, like, I think hitting the theming and making it feel cool is important for other layers of the game, for sure. So, I don't know. I mean, this is pretty, to me, like, I'm surprised they put out this many previews for these hero talents this early, like before we could even see alpha. It's just kind of a different, I guess it's like a different release schedule or priority than we've seen before. I mean, remember Shadowlands Alpha, when we had like very little info, but you could go do Torghast on like Demon Hunter. You know what I mean? Like they were just kind of throwing stuff at the wall. And this is sort of the opposite of that. We haven't seen it yet. We haven't been able to play it yet. But, you know, we have this whole laundry list of different hero talent specs coming in, and, you know, what do we think about it? Like, it's a different way to do it. Maybe they get a different kind of feedback. They might be looking for more targeted, you know, kind of responses, and maybe that's what it's all about.
It could be, yeah.
It's, like, if you plug this stuff into like an alpha build that has like meters, right, then you're going to get much different feedback than somebody combing through the web post and comparing the vibe of the talents, the feel of them, the aesthetic, and the numbers versus, well, I ran a dummy and this is what we're going to play. Okay, next.
Yeah, I think a lot of a very relatable way to sort of describe what this is going to feel like is if during Shadowlands, you could just swap covenants whenever you wanted during a dungeon or whatever it is, right? Because that's essentially what this is going to feel like for a lot of players, is a very themed choice of talents that enhance your talents and look really cool, often with a big button you can press that you can essentially swap and move around to, as you said, from doing Slayer to Colossus, that kind of idea, depending on what boss you're doing. I think you would have seen that, and you did see that to a certain degree with Covenants inside Shadowlands, of people bouncing back and forth between them, or feeling the need to, based off of either where damage numbers were or the actual situation, whether it was AoE or single target, that kind of idea, once they were able to much later in the expansion. I do feel like the hero talents are going to feel that way for a lot of players, where they're like, you know what, this is the button, or this is the ability, or this is the enhancement I really like. And so for the majority of players, they're just going to sit in Slayer because that's just what feels good to them and what feels true to them when they play the game, and it's what they're comfortable with. And they won't swap around at all. I think it will be the minority that does the like min-maxing, bumping specs, changing stuff out kind of situation that we see happen. So I like that they're getting this information out there ahead of time for folks who want to dive in and read about their class and determine where things are going. And more importantly than anything else, give feedback when they read these things and say, hey, you know what, Boomkin's not moving the direction I want with this particular set of hero talents. What if you guys consider doing this instead, or changing that? Or, you know, we're still at the point where they haven't released animations for a lot of this stuff yet that we're going to be seeing. So I imagine a lot of that's still in development or still being finalized at this point, since we aren't even in alpha yet. So, you know, at this point, when the warrior does big button X, a bunch of cubes just splatter all over the place, because that's really all they have that's animated at the moment, right? So I'm waiting for us to get into feedback from players, changing things about the classes, and us seeing an alpha where the animations start kicking in and people start going, oh yeah, that's amazing. Because for me, it was Convoke, right? I just think about Convoke every time this happens and going, this is one button that feels really good, has a great animation, and is a surprise and makes me happy whenever it happens, right? Like that's what that button was in alpha, beta, early Shadowlands, was like, man, Convoke is just really cool. And I was very disappointed when like the meta choice for people was go with Kyrian, because that's what you were supposed to be doing, because that's supposed to be the meta higher damage choice, when really it didn't end up being that way. But it was just more the case of this just didn't feel true to me and how I wanted to play the game, right? And I think the moment you stop denying that, you're going to stop having fun, and it's not going to be a game, it's going to be a chore, and that's no good. So the biggest thing with the hero talents, I think, for a lot of people will be what is true to them and what is actually fun for them. And I hope these blog posts can kind of help people along the way to sort of determine that, or at least give them the opportunity to give feedback to devs and say, hey, I feel like this isn't achieving what I was hoping it would, and maybe something like this might be cool, and just inspire some things with the devs to come up with better hero talents, or changing hero talents, or tweaked hero talents, or whatever it is that make people happy to play the game. Because they really need to, like, as you said, Dragonflight's been the prove it expansion. This next one has to be the, okay, you prove it every time and we're great. Like we're back in the game, right? Like I'm really hoping it's the revitalization of people's WoW habits.
Yeah, this is going to be the one that breaks the cycle of like good expansion, promising expansion to disappointing expansion, you know, and then we kind of had that BFA in the Shadowlands era was really brutal for a lot of people. I mean, we're big BFA fans around here, but it did not go over well broadly. Yeah. And I get why, you know, and then Shadowlands was a whole other thing that I'm not ready to talk about anymore. Put that on the shelf for a while. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I think Dragonflight's been really good with reestablishing that trust from the players that have been playing it, and people are looking forward to War Within, certainly. I do think hero talents seem like they could be essentially Covenants done right, which is like scary to say in a way, but it is like it's like your conduits and stuff like that, you know. It's like your active ability. It's very similar to that from like a high level design perspective, but way more player friendly and way more flexible and hopefully way more fun. So yeah, anyway, I don't know. I'm just waiting for alpha, man. Let me get in there. Let me spin up a tune and actually like put some points in and see what it does and how it feels and what it looks like. Yep. And I don't want to read a website thing with like a mock up of the tool, and you know, I can't wait. I want to get in there and check it out.
Yeah, I definitely just enjoyed putzing around in alpha and beta, just casting the same spells over and over again to sort of see the animations, how they worked, what was AoE, what wasn't. If there was a new system they put in, I remember when they brought back the Starfall Circle to be able to see where the edge of your Starfall was, so you could actually visualize that as a druid, was really nice. So those sorts of changes that come in are always welcome, and it's fun to play around with those things. It's an alpha and beta for sure. All right, Season 4 is bringing with it a big old dungeon loot revamp and difficulty revamp, okay? And I just want to preface this with, I love that where this post is going, all right? So this is the player feedback loop post that they put in. They went, as part of the ongoing development in Dragonflight, the development team identified 3 issues to address based on community feedback regarding the dungeon system as it is. Heroic dungeons are barely distinct from normal dungeons at maximum level, and that distinction mostly only matters during the first few days after players reach max level inside of the expansion. So Mythic 0 dungeons, as the second point, rapidly lose relevance a few weeks into an expansion once the Mythic Plus season starts, with occasional exceptions for the weekly event of just trying to knock 4 out as fast as you can kind of thing, right? The only truly endgame dungeon, this is point 3, is Mythic Plus, currently revolves around a timer. So Mythic Plus, obviously with that timer to complete the dungeon in time, rewards are based on that, progression's based on that. This means that other than new mega dungeons, there really isn't a place for endgame players who enjoy a more methodical dungeon pacing and gameplay. Which is funny because this is something we brought up when it came to the MDI versus, the Great Push, and the difference between the two and enjoying watching one over the other was that methodical gameplay and trying to accomplish something that was really more difficult without the pressures of a timer and how to try and cheese that timer as best as possible. So those are the 3 main points of feedback that they received. So given the combination of underutilizing difficulties and a gap in meeting player demand, we're restructuring dungeon difficulty and rewards in Season 4. Heroic difficulty and rewards will move up to the current level of Mythic 0. These dungeons will remain available to queue into via Group Finder through the item level requirement. Though the item level requirement will also go up accordingly. So they're basically saying, all right, all that loot that you were getting through Mythic 0 is going to essentially now be heroic loot. It'll be that tier of loot, that item level of loot that you're going to be getting for doing heroic dungeons. Mythic 0 difficulty and rewards will move up to roughly, they aren't sure yet, Mythic Plus level 8 to 10, somewhere inside that range. All right? So this is essentially being able to do a Mythic dungeon with no affixes, right? That's what Mythic 0 was. So you'll get rewards roughly to what you'd be getting Mythic Plus 8 to 10 for completing that dungeon. The existing Mythic Plus system will pick up where that leaves off, right? So a Mythic 5 in Season 4 is roughly equivalent to a Mythic 15 today, right? So if you were like, hey, I'm going to hop into Mythic Plus, anyone want to do a 5, that is now equivalent to a 15 today. Now there's all sorts of cool aspects about that I love. The first is that they're shrinking the numbers on Mythic Plus by doing this, right? You're still gonna be able to do up to a Mythic, 15, Mythic Plus 15, but that'll be equivalent to doing a 30 basically today is what you're going to be looking at, right? There'll be something like that. So this basically is going to shrink where more people will be running Mythic 8s or Mythic 10s as sort of the average person who's doing stuff, because that'll be your 20s that people are doing now, and sort of diving in and enjoying that factor. So, all right.
Yeah, I just want to set the table a little bit, I guess, because there's some more nitty gritty stuff in the post that we'll get into more.
Yeah,
but the basic idea here, I think, if you are a high level Keystone player, in other words, somebody who's doing plus 20s. Okay, if you do your teleports every season, nothing really changes for you. Your experience is not going to be really any different in Season 4 with these changes, other than you have to subtract 10 from your keystones. You want to do 10s instead of 20s or whatever, right? It's that whole thing. And maybe on the way up, it's a little bit more streamlined because you're getting maybe better gear from the Mythic 0 World Tour the first week, depending on how they launch stuff, right? If Mythic Zeros are viable to do the first week, but you can't get into Keystones yet, then you might get a little boost, and then you can get up to your target Keystone level more quickly versus doing Mythic 2, 3, 4s and pushing the keys up to get into the range that you want to play. So,
right.
That may be a change. It may not even be. But so, your changes for the higher end players are minimal. Just a little bit of an aesthetic there on your keystone number. That's about it.
And we see that shrinking keystone number every season anyways, because the difficulty shifts and the item level shifts and all that. So it's just going to be a different shift in that keystone number. Yeah.
But your target's also changing, which is different this season. We haven't seen like the target, like top end keystone rank change in a long time.
It's been a while since they were like, hey, actually now you want to run 14s to get your top reward is what it used to be back in the day.
It used to oscillate between 10s and 15s, right? And then they would put, then they put top end stuff at 20, but now the top end stuff is going to be at 10.
Yeah.
So, that's just like a mental shift, but this provides a lot of extra space here in that heroic to mythic 0 range, right? Heroics are going to be a lot harder, really, and they're a queuable experience. So I wonder how that's going to feel and how players are going to react to that. I mean, they cut mechanics from heroic dungeons, usually, and it sounds like maybe they're not going to. Like when they talk about how the rough equivalence of difficulty, I would expect that a heroic dungeon in season 4 would have all the mythic boss mechanics and everything. Maybe it won't, but I feel like it probably should, because that's how people kind of get used to it to then get into the keystone system and start going up the ranks, is seeing a low stakes version of the mechanic, practicing and mastering it, and then moving on to a more difficult version of it, right?
Yeah, and we should preface in here too that season 4 is all the Dragonflight dungeons. It's just the Dragonflight dungeons in that pool.
That's what it certainly sounds like that. Like they haven't totally said that, but we know that these changes apply to all 8 of the Dragonflight dungeons. That pretty much implies, and also I think there was a post in the roadmap or from Holly earlier in the year or late last year that said season 4 is going to revisit the Dragonflight dungeons. So it sounds like our pool is going to be the 8 Dragonflight dungeons, which we can talk about in a little bit, but that might influence my personal goals for the season. But the cool thing, I think, this is the cool thing about this change overall. The point I'm trying to make here is that for the really invested, high level, experienced dungeon runners, this does nothing. There's no tangible change to your experience, but it opens up a ton of space for people to get into the system and to play dungeons, check it out, get some good rewards, try to develop some mastery, and to get farther along into the system, because heroic dungeons are going to be harder, more than likely. I mean, their tuning's going to go up.
Yeah, they specifically say the tuning goes up to the baseline of Mythic 0 in the current system. So expect that, right?
Yeah, I mean, the tuning's going to go up for sure. And then if you add the other layer, the boss mechanics coming back in, then they're going to be harder. People are going to queue into stuff, and it's going to be... it's not going to be like it has been for years now.
They do also say, though, that mythic difficulty changes and mechanics will not be present in the heroic difficulty. So keep that in mind. You're not going to have the mythic mechanics present in that. So
right. I think that's a mistake, actually. But that's besides the point. I'll be curious to see if there's a niche. Like, they're trying to appeal to a different type of player to get into dungeons. And that's what this is really about. Yeah. And I'll be curious to see, does that player exist? And is this what they want? Or do people respond to this? I think it's worth a shot. I think it's worth doing. The question is, can you cultivate the audience? That's how I'm looking at it.
Yeah, the biggest thing here is that they are identifying 3 key issues with essentially the player base has with how they've laid out dungeons and trying to resolve them. And I think regardless, we're going to come up with something very positive from this. I think having a system that isn't as daunting as far as, oh my goodness, how do I get to level 120? Remember those days, right? On my character, and going, hey, the big level squish is here. It's now 60 as the cap. And everyone was like, oh my God, this is so much better. That was so daunting and overwhelming. It's a similar system of, okay, we're squishing Mythic Plus numbers, which means it's no longer, I'll never be able to do a 20, because it's like, well, but can you do a 7? Yes. Okay, well then you're essentially doing a 17 right now. Just keep that in mind. Right. You're almost there, right?
You get there, yeah.
So it's that consideration of, okay, that number not being as high does affect people's mentality when thinking about a system like this, right? And the climb is a lot easier. You're not, okay, let's try and push this keystone from a 6 to a 9, and then from a 9 to an 11, and then from an 11 to a 14, and then from a 14 to a... you're not doing that anymore, which I also think is super, super nice for players because you just don't have to push them as high. So I'm excited for this. I think this is going to be a really good system for folks, and I think regardless, they're going to see benefit in it. I think upping heroic dungeons so they stay more relevant and help gear people faster, that's going to be the biggest factor for a lot of these guys, is you can queue into a heroic dungeon and get essentially like the setup gear for doing Mythic Plus, which I think is great, as opposed to like, oh, you could do heroics, but then you really should do some Mythic Zeros regularly because those are going to help you get some more gear. And then you should, well, maybe you'll dabble in really low keys first. And then like, I think this will be a much better gear path for everyone. And also keep in mind, this is probably going to affect the vault and how the vault works and vault rewards work too, because you're going to be getting better vault rewards from all this stuff. So I think overall, it's looking like a really good system, and there are more changes coming, right? Like this isn't like the end of it. There's going to be more stuff that they do with next expansion, and we'll have to see how they choose to lay out next expansion and what's going on with it. So I know I'm excited for this. They do highlight differences with Mythic difficulty, which I want to go through. So they said the tuning and rewards of Mythic difficulty are increasing to be equivalent of a +10 dungeon with affixes in the current system. There are no time, and obviously they said 8 to 10 in the earlier post, so I assume they're just saying 10 inside this one as a more generic patch note. There are no timers.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
There was a kind of an explanation that like without affixes, and it's kind of hard to say exactly how much harder it's going to be. So say 8 to 10, so which makes sense.
Yeah.
We talk about affixes all the time, every week, right? And it's like they can wildly increase or decrease the difficulty of a keystone on a given week. So yeah, I think having in mind that it's like, well, it's about a +10 without affixes. It's hard to think about that, but that's what they're shooting for.
Yeah. There's not going to be a timer or FXs, or there's no limitation on changing specializations or talents during the dungeons. You can still do all that too during these Mythic Zeros. The goal is to create a mega dungeon-like difficulty for this experience. The difficulty should present a meaningful challenge and provide commiserate rewards without the pressures of the current Mythic Plus system. So Mythic Zero is still going to be on a weekly lockout as well inside of this model. So just keep that in mind. Mythic Plus system will have rewards up to level 10 with starting +2 and starting from what would regularly be a +11 in the current Mythic Plus system. So just keep that in mind. Basically, we're starting at, so Mythic Zero is up to 10. So you're going to start with 11 rewards when you start doing a Mythic +1. I don't think there's ones. You can't do it.
There's not a +1.
There's not a +1.
It's a little weird. Yeah. We call them Mythic Zeros, but nothing in the game calls them that. They're actually Mythic Ones.
Mythic Ones, yeah.
But they're not +1s.
Yeah, it's very strange. All right.
We were talking about it a little bit off air. Like the terminology around all these systems and in this post is a little inscrutable, which is why we're trying to hopefully make it make a bit more sense today.
Yeah, so affixes are going to start at 2, 5, and 10. So you're going to get your Fortified and Tyrannical at a +2. You're going to get your Entangling, Corporeal, all that sort of business at +5. And your Bursting and Bolstering and all that stuff is going to be coming at +10. Which, keep in mind, that now means that essentially you get your first set of affixes doing a Mythic +12 in the current season, with the next set coming in at +15s and the last one coming in at +20s. So like that's the difficulty scale that they're choosing to add these things in at. So that's a lot higher. You will get some really nice rewards from doing 15s. Essentially this season, it's +5s inside next season without having to deal with the last affix. Like that's pretty crazy for folks who are wanting to get into the system. So just keep that in mind. Dungeon ratings should be equivalent to what they represent in the current system. There should be a smaller range of keystone levels to find groups for, and more meaningful progression between each level. All right. So that's pretty awesome. All right. I'm not going to dig into they had to put in a big spreadsheet with like, this is where the champion track aligns with different rewards. I'll say that normal dungeons are on the explorer track, just like they were before. Heroic dungeons are going to be about halfway through the adventurer track. So keep that in mind as far as what you're doing for your Mythic Zero stuff. We're then going to see the Mythic Zero stuff kick off on Champion and progress through the Champion track so that we can actually get some better stuff, with obviously vault rewards being up to Mythic 10 and plus for doing really high-end keys. For doing like a +10, you're going to be getting yourself essentially the 522s is what they're saying item level wise. for doing a +10. So that's your max reward is a +10. So yeah, I think overall good system. I'm looking forward to seeing it, come through here. And they have a little bit here about crests and flight stones for folks, which we'll touch on after Jason gives us feedback on this.
Yeah, just a couple of things I think to point out here. I like the idea of creating the mega dungeon-like experience for these dungeons. I think we saw a lot of really positive response to Dawn of the Infinite when it came out last summer. I have enjoyed the mega dungeons quite a bit, and I think Dawn of the Infinite was one of the better ones that they've done. But obviously, that's a long dungeon, right? And especially when we're first learning it and stuff. And it was a little bit, more of a gear check initially. It could take an hour or more to run through that. And, that's maybe not the dungeon experience that everybody's looking to have in WoW in 2024. But having that kind of that vibe of like, okay, we just have to figure out how to get through here, right? We have to get through this pack or whatever the case may be. We have to work out this boss strat. Like that could be really rewarding for a small group. And I think giving that more space to breathe without stepping on the toes of the high-end players is probably really good. The weekly lockout for the Mythics kind of stinks, but what else are they going to do? It's lucrative enough that like you don't want people to short circuit too much of other activities with it, I guess. It's just the way it is. I mean, we've had high-end dungeons on weekly lockout for I don't know, since Burning Crusade or something, right? When they put heroic dungeons in, or was it? I don't know. It's been a minute, so I'm not really surprised. But it may short circuit some of this a bit, But then again, maybe you have a dungeon team and you guys like to do your 8 Dragonflight dungeons every week, and then you get your vault nice and filled up, and you get some gear. Like I can certainly see that working out.
Right.
A couple of things with Mythic Plus. I think there's one really interesting thing to note here, which is that when you get to the top end of the reward scale, if you notice, so we know that the top end, the 2 top ends of reward tiers in terms of your vault rewards are going to be Myth 1 of 4 and Myth 2 of 4. And you can get Myth 1 of 4 from doing an 8 and a 9, and you can get Myth 2 of 4 from doing a +10. That third affix only kicks in at +10, right? So you have, if all you care about is your vault rewards, you could do 8s. You do +8s, and you come out with Mythic 1 of 4. Now you're going to need more crests and flight stones to upgrade those to that extra rank. But that seems like way more player-friendly in terms of getting gear and filling out vault slots. Doing the equivalent of 18s right now, for that, and you're cutting off a third affix. Like this season's been pretty easy, I think, overall. I would say I say that just for the simple fact that it's the highest rating I've ever gotten in an 8 dungeon pool, right?
Right.
So obviously they did something with the tuning that lined up and it made it really accessible to me. I'm not like an amazing player. I'm a middle-aged man. I do my best, but I'm not some super high skill player, and I crushed my previous performance in other seasons. So I feel like this season's pretty easy, and I'm thinking, I could just farm like the equivalent of this season's 18s, but cut off the top level affix. Like how much easier would that even be? So that kind of jumps out at you, I think, when you look at this. Like, yeah, sure, it's cool to do the +10s and do the highest rank. You get the highest rank gear out of the thing, but it's all upgradable. So it's not that thing that we had early on when the item upgrade system came in where, this one's stuck. This only goes up to hero 6 out of 6, and you can't get those last couple upgrades on it. Or, this is a mythic equivalent item, but it doesn't have an upgrade track. Like, that wasn't great. We don't have to worry about that if these come in at mythic 1 of 4 or 2 of 4. Very negligible difference there, and you can get them to the max item level. It also looks like we're getting plus 39 item levels from Season 3 into Season 4, so another big jump in terms of character power here at the end of the expansion. And, one other thing I think about is if the pool is going to be just the 8 Dragonflight dungeons, then I don't know how hard I'm pushing in Season 4 because I have no teleports to unlock, right? I did all that in Seasons 1 and 2. And if I can get gear on the track that I want it, and upgradable from doing +8s, then am I doing plus 10s really? Like maybe I want to hit Keystone Master and maybe I got to do plus 10s to do that. But am I pushing beyond that? Am I filling up my vault with, plus 10s, 11s, 12s? Like, probably not. I think it's going to be a much more chill season for me because the goalposts aren't really there and they're being very generous with distributing this loot. So, which I have kind of mixed feelings about. It's exciting in a way. It's like, I like that. I'm cool with taking it easy here at the end of the expansion and having this last kind of victory lap season, hanging out and just, plowing through some keys and getting some cool rewards. But I was also really happy that Amir Drasil felt pretty easy and season 3 keys felt pretty easy. And then, 2.5 months in, I had nobody left to play with. So, I think those goals matter to players and having those goalposts and stuff. But it's also going to be summertime. And, I think the team is probably aware of that kind of stuff, right? So that probably plays into some of these decisions. But for me, I'm excited at the prospect of like, it's going to be a chill season for keys. I'm going to take it a bit easier and I'm still going to get good, powerful rewards. And I don't have to stress about timelines. When is this patch coming out? When are these getting shut off? Have I gotten all the plus 20s and all that stuff? Like taking a season off from that, or what will be plus 10s, I guess, if they continue this in War Within Season 1. I like that. I like that aspect of it. And I mean, man, I don't know. To some degree, I feel like it's shockingly generous to be handing out Mythic 1 out of 4 gear weekly for doing keystones that have 2 affixes, right? Like, I don't know. It's not really a complaint, but I'm just surprised. I guess I'm just surprised. And maybe is this a preview or like a little dry run of War Within having,
I think so,
like much more de-emphasized affixes, right? Like maybe I know the community wants no affixes, and I'm kind of two minds about that, but I feel like they should do it just to see, because people have been asking for it for so long. Shut them off for a season and see what happens with participation rates and stuff like that, what people's feedback is. And maybe this is a step in that direction where it's like, okay, you can still get really good stuff without us sticking it to you with all these affixes. Like maybe that's the first step on that path. So a lot of interesting stuff here in this chart and in these couple paragraphs.
It'll certainly open up the ability for players to have more group dynamic, which is why people want no affixes, right? People want no affixes primarily because they find that they can't get into groups. Because everyone wants to bring XYZ that week, because that's the combo that's going to make the key the easiest to do that week because of the affixes that are applying to it. So I understand that, and by pushing it this far down the line, kicking it this far down the road, as far as having to do keystones that are 20s essentially to get the full affixes, I feel like that does open up a lot of the earlier content to more players, and that'll be an interesting thing to see how that plays out, right? I'm with you. I'm just curious to see how it all plays out. All right. Crests and Flightstone rewards are changing to match difficulty with only some minor adjustments. So Flightstone earnings for any given Mythic Plus will match the equally challenging Mythic Plus from the previous season. This means that a Mythic plus 2 in Season 4 will give the same amount of Flightstones as a plus 12 in Season 3 does. The rewards will continue to match difficulty, even if what we're calling that difficulty changes. Bonus Flightstone rewards for increasing any party member's Mythic Plus score are also remaining unchanged. The Whelpling Crests are no longer available for Mythic Plus dungeons, as those no longer exist. Players can continue to collect Whelpling Crests from many outdoor sources, if that's something you're looking to get. Players will earn 10 Drake Crests on successful completion of a Mythic 0 dungeon. You see, they just called it Mythic 0. I'm just putting it out there, as there is no timer to beat. Worm Crests will be available in Mythic plus 2 to Mythic plus 5 dungeons in the same quantities as existing Mythic plus dungeons, and Aspect Crests will be available in any Mythic plus dungeon plus 6 and up, also in the same quantities as existing Mythic plus dungeons. We believe these changes provide new opportunities for players to experience Mythic and Mythic plus difficulties while providing additional challenges for endgame players in the future. We look forward to your feedback, and we'll see you in the dungeons when Dragonflight Season 4 goes live in the future. All right. Yeah, I think overall, great post. I think it can get a little convoluted when we dig into some of this stuff, but I think where they're headed I think they're heading in the right direction. It's going to be really neat to explore, see how it works, and hopefully people find it much easier to gear a character up and dive into some of this content so that when there is a lull because it's summertime and a bunch of people leave, a bunch of other people are able to step in and do things because they have the time and are available. You just have more people who are geared enough and brave enough to step foot into more high-end group-based content, because that's what the game needs on a really big level, is more people participating in high-end group-based content and being brave enough to do so. And obviously the people who are currently doing that content being open-minded enough to welcome them in a non-derogatory way when you're interacting with these individuals. So remember, if you're someone who does high-end rating or high-end Mythic Plus keys, it is your responsibility, if you want to keep doing those keys, to make people feel welcome and be patient with them as they get used to it. That is part of the gig of being someone who's in that position. So just keep that in mind. If you're going to act like everyone who wants to queue up for a plus 20 needs to be someone who can do plus 30s, that is just not a reasonable expectation. So just, let's be as welcome as we can as a community, please.
Yeah, I agree with that. I'm excited to see how players respond to this, right? I can't say that it'll probably impact my experience very much. I don't think that it will, except for what I kind of just mentioned of maybe taking the edge off that like top end of what I have to do to feel like I got what I wanted out of the process. Like probably will be relaxed a lot in season 4 for me personally. But I'm thinking like I'd be much more amenable to taking an alt through Mythic 0 with a guild group, or with friends, than to do like low keys. Low keys kind of feel pointless. I don't know. There's something psychological about it, right? Because you're at the low end of the system, you're getting stuff that isn't as good as it could be, and then there's sort of that internal pressure to like, oh well, then I should try to push it up higher and do hard. Yeah, right. And I think separating the tracks out more like this maybe would help with that for me. It's like, okay, no timer, no affixes. Let's just go play, and I'll get some stuff that's like decently relevant. It's not total, garbage gear. It's not stuff that I want to take into, plus 10s or Mythic Raid probably, but I don't play those tunes like that anyway.
Yeah.
Right now, I don't really want to do anything with them at all. So something like this might give it a space where, yeah, you know what, this is fun. This is something I want to do on a different character. This is a good way to catch up somebody who's been away. It's a good way to get somebody into the mindset of playing dungeons, because it is, just in terms of the raw tuning and stuff, right? A Mythic 0 today is way less challenging than a Mythic 10 just from the mob tuning, right? Yeah. So Mythic 0 is going to present a much bigger challenge in Season 4 in terms of bosses will be live for a couple minutes, so you better know how all their mechanics work and what happens and how to react to them. And Trash is actually going to challenge you. It's going to hit you hard, So
but you won't have affixes.
Great.
You won't have affixes.
Yeah. Yeah, you're just focusing on the actual content there, and I think that'll be great for helping people get into the dungeon system if they're not, or try out different roles. It may be like this would be much better than trying to do like plus 7s, plus 10s just to get some kind of key done. You know what I mean? It's gonna be a huge upgrade over that, and then maybe that eventually funnels more players in those roles into the pool of Keystone players. It could be, or maybe that's where people want to top out. But either way, what are you really getting out of Mythic plus 2 to plus 10 right now? It's like you have a lot of toxicity, you have a lot of bad feelings, you have people not getting what they want. People are in those queues for very different reasons, right? Yeah. So I think this cuts a lot of that out, and then you're narrowing that funnel, right? You're just the people who want to do the traditional Keystone experience. They have a much narrower band here, and then you have way more room for people to just get into dungeons, play with other people, hopefully have fun with the system and get some cool rewards. So I don't know. I think it's a cool idea. It's not really something, if you would have, pressed me for Season 4 predictions, maybe like 8 Dragonflight dungeons, that might have come up at some point. I think we were talking about that in the Discord one day even. But this whole rework thing, I feel like, not that it came out of nowhere, but like I wasn't, obviously they've worked on this a lot, but like I was not expecting anything like this to be in the tail end of this expansion. So I think it's a cool surprise, and I hope that I hope that it finds an audience, man. I hope people find value out of this, and that expanding out what a non-Keystone dungeon can be, it finds an audience and the people like it.
Well, the other big factor here that they don't mention in this post at all that I think is really important is Mythic Zeros. If someone goes, "Ugh, I hate this," and leaves the group, you can invite someone else to come in, and then they can actually do that dungeon with you. Right now, if someone gives up on a plus 8 or a plus 10, you're just kind of screwed. You just, okay, well, this keystone's dead. Great. I guess we have to start over or do something, or maybe we try and 4-man carry our way through the back end of this. That's not super enjoyable content versus going, hey, you know what? If we're doing Mythic Zeros, there's no timer for pressure. No one's bailing because they're rage quitting because we're not going to be able to time this keystone anyways. Like that's not happening, right? And you're in a situation where if someone does have to leave for whatever reason, you can backfill that spot with someone else who comes in and gets loot and gets the completion for the week and gets all that stuff. And you can still finish it as a group. Like it's just overall giving purpose to the Mythic Zero, which I really like because I feel like it hasn't had purpose for a long time, just like Heroic hasn't had purpose for a long time. So hopefully this really gives purpose to those difficulties. It's kind of exciting that way. So looking forward to that. All right. I want to take a moment to thank our patrons. They contribute a ton to our show and help us to improve on the content we create. Today, I'm giving a special shout out to Alianas, Arajian, James, Kapawi, Max, Pinky, Shorel, and Rager. Thank you so much for hopping in and supporting the show. We appreciate what you do as well as what all of our patrons do to support our show and allow us to keep putting out episodes every week. We got no new patrons this week, but thank you all again for your incredible support. You allow us to pay all of the bills associated with hosting and posting and recording and all that kind of fun stuff. So I appreciate that all gets covered by you all, and that allows Jason and I to make time during the week to be able to do this regularly. And yeah, thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, patrons, for all your support, past and present. It does mean a lot and helps us keep the show in production and online for you. And have fun tomorrow or Wednesday, depending on your region, in .6, and we'll see what happens.
Yes. I also want to say and give a shout out to people who've been writing us emails. We've gotten some really good emails lately, and I really appreciate it. All your feedback or suggestions or ideas or just praise is really, it really makes me smile during the day that, hey, yes, people listen to the show and they care and they want to do this. And it's always nice to hear from you all. And one of the notes we got was, hey, when you're doing content that's about all the different versions of WoW, it would be great if you broke up the show into categories about those different pieces of content so they didn't overlap as much or you didn't bounce back and forth. And I 100% agree. We will do our best to try and structure classic stuff or, whatever it is to be in one grouping and make it really clear when moving from one to the other. Maybe I'll even for once introduce a different sounder, who knows, and make it really clear when we're shifting from one to the other for folks. But yeah, we appreciate all the emails and everything that you all do. So thank you very much for writing those in. Another great way to support the show, if you enjoyed it, is you leaving us a 5-star review over on your iTunes or Apple Podcast. Those 5-star reviews really help us out a lot, and we love reading them here live from our listeners. This one comes in from Boron Master, entitled Great Show. Well-balanced show that has something for all Warcrafters. I look forward to listening to this every week. The best WoW show I've found. Well, thank you so much, Boron Master. You are wonderful for leaving us a 5-star. It helps raise us up those charts and more people find our show. And I'm glad that you're finding us helpful and that we're the most helpful one you found. It's been really weird seeing other shows sort of taper off or switch topics or move away. It's happening again. I know Titan Forge, which was another show that some folks in the WoW community did for a long time, has now recently done their last episode. And so they're now done. But we stay strong here at TSZ and pump out the episodes every week. And I'm glad you guys are enjoying the content we make.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time, and congratulations on mastering the Boron. Mm-hmm. That must have taken at least 10,000 hours, I would assume, right?
Yep.
No, but seriously, thank you so much for writing in. And it's it's sometimes it's easier to put the show together than others, and it has been weird in this gulf while we're waiting for patch. But I think, after next week, we're probably going to see the floodgates open, right? Because tomorrow we'll get the patch, and then we'll see what it's actually all about. We'll get a bunch of documentation about it. I would be shocked if we get like 10.2.7 PTR by like Thursday or next Thursday. So, I think we're gonna start actually ramping back up again. It's been a weird couple of months for, hey, what's the show about this week? And sometimes we don't really know because we don't have a lot of in development stuff to talk about, and season 3 is really tapering off. But that's all about to change, and it's just a few hours here, basically.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see what all transpires when it comes to this kind of thing, because with a limited time event, right? Like when I hear limited time event, my brain immediately goes to how limited is this event going to be? Are we going to be seeing this for like a month? Is this going to be up until season 4? Is this going to be something that runs through season 4 to the end of the expansion? How limited is this limited time event is something that's on my mind. Because, I don't want to miss out, and I want to get the rewards, and I want to check it out, and I have no idea what it is, so who knows? All right, we'll just figure it out,
Like the Mage Tower was a limited time event, and the Hearthstone anniversary event is a limited time event. Those are very different time limits.
Very different time limits, yeah. All right, that wraps up episode 623 of The Starting Zone. If you want to check out show notes for this episode or leave us a comment on the show, you can head on over to thestartingzone.com, the official website for the Starting Zone podcast. If you want to contact the show and leave us your feedback or ask a question, you can email us at thestartingzone@gmail.com or reach out to us on Twitter at The Starting Zone, or you can join our Discord over at thestartingzone.com/Discord. And if you want to get your hands on some TSE gear, you can find that over at TeePublic. That's teepublic.com/stores/The Starting Zone, and check out all the designs on shirts and mugs and stickers and stuff like that. And Jason, where can folks find you around the interwebs?
Well, the best place to find me, as always, is over on Twitter. You can find me over there at Shieldwald. You can also find me over on Blue Sky. I haven't really been posting over there, but I do have an account, and I do check it out. It's just Jay Lucas over there, so you can come say hi. Video channels are over at twitch.tv/Shieldwald and youtube.com/Shieldwald. They've been relatively dormant the last couple months. I've been sick and not really playing WoW outside of like Tuesday nights and stuff, but depending on maintenance and everything tomorrow, maybe we'll get in there and see what's up with the patch. So check those out. I mean, I will be back streaming stuff for season 4 and everything for sure, if I don't get started before then. So come check out the video channels as well.
All right. And if you're trying to find me, you can find me on Twitter at Spencer_Downey. You can also head on over to your twitch.tv/SpencerHD or youtube.com/@SpencerHD. Leave me a follow over there. And if you're trying to find me on Blue Sky, it's SpencerHD on Blue Sky. So feel free to check that out as well. With that, for Jason and myself, we want to say thanks for listening, and jobs done.